Hey guys, it's Core Ross and Mx4 News. Today we're testing the P10 Roni and the Mx4 Storm as their recoil was getting made worse in the mid-season balancing. And if you've missed it, I've already got a Mythbusters out going over the other changes, which include a cap can rework. And a disclaimer here, so first of all, we're testing on the test server, so that means things can get tweaked before it goes live, and I'll attempt to keep you up to date if it does. And also, I hate testing recoil. The only reason I'm doing this is because I like to pass on the information of how it's going to be when the patch drops, especially for controller recoil, because that's what I use. And of course, people on consoles cannot easily access the test server unless, of course, you have a PC. But we'll be looking at both mouse and keyboard and controller recoil in this video. And finally, my opinion on recoil is super amateurish. I'm going to take away some kind of general conclusions from my tests here, but you at home are the ones who are actually the experts, and let me know what you think in the comments below. And just like the last recoil video I did, there's some very big surprises in here. So let's start with the Mx4 Storm. So on PC right now with a mouse and keyboard, this is what we're looking at for the recoil pattern, and it's incredibly good. It is very nice and definitely a very good gun to use. It only gets somewhat crazy once you've been holding down that trigger for a long period of time. And then if we switch over to the test server version, you can see that there's a massive increase in the vertical recoil, probably at least 50%, if not more. And if we move on to a side-by-side comparison, you can see how the new recoil pattern is at least twice as bad vertically, and actually, oddly enough, the horizontal doesn't look quite as bad, although that might just be down to the stretch that we've got going on there vertically. But I would say that the old version actually looks a lot like what I would expect a controller recoil pattern to look like. In fact, it actually looks exactly the same. So if we go and take a look at the current live version of the controller recoil for the Mx4 Storm, it is almost identical to the mouse and keyboard recoil. Now the way this should always work is that the controller version should be a more compressed version of the mouse and keyboard recoil, because of course controlling recoil with a controller is harder than using a mouse. But anyway, let's switch over to the new recoil pattern for the Mx4 Storm on controller. And you can see that there's been a considerable increase in the vertical recoil, but the horizontal is roughly the same. And we very much see the changes for the controller mirroring what we've seen on the PC, as the vertical has increased, but horizontal is maybe somewhat similar. However, there is some surprises coming out of this. So let's actually compare the new mouse and keyboard recoil and the new controller recoil. And I think you'll probably see that vertically they're somewhat similar. Definitely PC goes up considerably more, but not by a huge margin. However, the horizontal is, I would say, far worse on the controller, and on mouse and keyboard it actually looks very, very tame. Like all you're going to have to control is the vertical and not worry too much about the horizontal at all, whereas on controller you're going to have to be dealing with the horizontal and vertical at the same time. But anyway, let's move on to the P10 Roni. So this is again quite surprising with the results, and in the opposite way to what we just had with the Mx4 Storm. So let's start with the recoil pattern for the mouse and keyboard on PC with the current live version of the game. And as you can see, that is an insanely good recoil pattern. There's pretty much nothing you have to do to control this. It just looks wonderful. Now, moving over to the test server version, it is considerably worse vertically. The horizontal looks somewhat similar, but of course the vertical is really bad, and there is also less bullets in the magazine with this change, so that makes it even worse. If we look at a side-by-side comparison, you can see how much worse that is getting. But like I say, the results here are actually getting skewed by the fact that we're losing bullets from the magazine, 4 of them in total actually. So I thought we'd do a better test here where I just drew some lines. So again, no recoil control, this is just simply looking at how they individually go up and down. It's kind of interesting because if we are doing magazine dumps, it pulls to the left first, then the right, then the left, then the right, then the left, then the right. If it wasn't for the very compressed recoil pattern, this would actually be probably quite a hard gun to control. But moving over to the new version and looking at it again, we've still got the left and right switch, but it doesn't look quite as bad. But of course the vertical is just nuts. And side by side, it is a huge difference. And considering the left-hand old version has 4 more bullets per magazine, it's actually quite surprising to see that on the right hand side the recoil pattern is so much taller, and we haven't like zoomed in more on the other side. These are both zoomed into the same amount. So yeah, this is definitely quite shocking, but it's still actually a very good gun, so we'll see how this actually continues to perform in the future. However, that's not actually the surprising result. So let's move over to controller. This is our current live version of the controller recoil for the P10 Roni, and again, looks absolutely gorgeous. It is incredibly compressed and pinpoint accurate. And yet again, if you were aiming at the chest of the enemy, you wouldn't have to do any recoil control to kill that player with a headshot from just a few rounds from your weapon, so it is lovely. But moving over to the new version is interesting because it doesn't look that bad. Like, the actual vertical hasn't really increased by any significant margin, if at all, but the left to right horizontal definitely has been increased. However, when we compare these side by side, they both look really good. Now again, the actual results are a little bit skewed as we've lost 4 rounds in the magazine for the new version, but still, even if we had those 4 extra rounds, we wouldn't see a pattern that would go that much higher than the current version. And the left to right is not that bad at all. So this really still looks amazing. And I also did the tests for the vertical lines as well to get an idea. So old version looked like this. Instead of the PC where it went left, right, it's a bit more random on controller with a little bit going left, a little bit going right. But if we look at the new version, it is pretty much the same. Actually looks very similar. And if we put them side by side, this is where I think the best comparison is. And in my opinion, what it shows is that the P10 Roni is not getting nerfed with recoil on controller. It is getting nerfed by losing 4 bullets per magazine. However, the recoil is staying considerably similar to what it was before, and you're still going to be able to be super pinpoint accurate with this weapon. And that is a big surprise, because if we go back to the Mx4 Storm results for the new recoil on mouse and keyboard against the new recoil on controller, I would say that the controller one is about the same vertically and actually worse horizontally. Now let's take a look at the P10 Roni with the new mouse and keyboard recoil against the new controller recoil, and the differences are stark. So first of all, this is both with the new version with the reduced magazine size. So these are both firing full magazines, and the PC one is at least twice as vertical, and of course both of them are probably about the same horizontally, although it looks a bit more predictable on the PC. So I guess we can move on to conclusions. So again, my conclusions here are super amateurish, and I would love to hear what your conclusions are in the comments below. But my takeaway here is that the Mx4 Storm is getting made worse all round. However, I think the console players are taking a harder hit than the PC players. Then for the P10 Roni, the PC players are absolutely getting hit really hard. And honestly, I don't think there's much of a difference with the controller recoil, although losing the 4 rounds in the magazine definitely sucks. So that's definitely a nerf all round for both platforms, but that recoil is still insane on console. So we'll have to wait and see if they tweak it a bit more. But currently, this recoil has now been on the test server for over a week. There's a good chance this is what's going to make it to live. But simply put, where it stands right now, the P10 Roni on PC is going to be a good weapon, but no longer a top tier weapon. And on console, it is going to remain a top tier weapon, slightly down the level by that reduction in magazine size. But recoil wise, looks amazing. And like I said at the start of this video, I hate to test recoil, but the fact that I've got such a satisfying result here and a surprising one kind of makes it worth it. This has actually been a recoil video that I've enjoyed the outcome of editing together. I hate doing the test, but the actual editing this together and figuring out what's going on is pretty damn cool, and I've really enjoyed testing this one specifically. So anyway guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.